resilience happens all throughout our lives. So what have you chosen to talk about?
Well, today I've chosen to talk about healing from sexual abuse, actually, from when I was a child. It stays with you and it goes with you throughout your life, but there are different moments in life where you know you're being affected, and it's affecting relationships, and it's affecting identity. Really, at the end of the day, it's like our identity gets all caught up in these experiences, and that's not who you are, and that's not who I was.
Yes.
So that's what I've worked through. It's been a long time for me.
Okay. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
What happened?
Okay, so I have to say that I am the youngest of 6 children, and I have 3 older brothers and I have 2 older sisters. And we one day all went to this neighbor's house. He was, I think, like 15 or 16 years old, and he had his own room kind of separate from the house. And he had a drum kit, and we were all playing, he was letting everybody play with his drums. But the catch was we all had to be naked.
Oh.
And I was like about 4 years old. Time gets a little bit folded there between 4 and 5. And so when we were all done with that, we put our clothes on and we're leaving his room. And he grabbed my arm and pulled me back and slammed the door shut after all my siblings had left the room. And I was probably, like I said, very little. So the door had a deadbolt. He locked the deadbolt, and then he told me he wanted me to kiss his penis. Well, I'm 4, and I'm like, oh, I am not doing that. And I was a fighter, Lisa. I mean, I was loud, and I was screaming, and I was crying, and he was laughing at me and throwing this key up and down to the door, and said to me, if you can catch this key, you can go. And to my surprise, I caught it.
Wow.
And I ran to the door to unlock it, and he slammed it shut again, locked it again, put the key up on the top of the door frame, and said, just come over here and kiss it, and I'll let you go. And I'm screaming at him, no, you won't. You're a liar. You're not going to do that. And at the same time, I'm in there wondering, where's my brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
Why isn't anybody coming to rescue me? Because I thought if I shouted loud enough, if I fought enough, if I cried enough, they would hear me and they would come and rescue me, and nobody came.
Wow.
So I'm this little tiny girl. I'm stuck in this very difficult situation. I'm terrified. And I'm thinking, how do I get out of this? Nobody's coming to help. And so, the fight or flight mechanism that I actually was operating under was not doing me any good.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're a child, your brain thinks things differently. So I started to think, okay, how do I get myself out of this?
Yes.
Because nobody else is going to help me. So I finally thought, well, I really don't have a whole lot of options, so I'm going to have to try this kiss it thing and see if he's actually going to be, real with it.
Yes.
And he did. He let me go.
Wow.
Now he trapped me one other time, and tied me up, took my clothes off, and then just looked at me. That was the weirdest thing. And then I managed to stay away from that point on and to stay out of it. But what happened was I did have a fight or flight in me, but that snapped. Like I just kind of froze, and I had to do what I was told to do. And so that made it easier for me to be abused again.
Yes.
Throughout my life, my younger life. And so my parents actually found out about this incident from a neighbor. He had tried to molest another little girl and then used my name and said I did it voluntarily.
Oh, wow.
So one of the things that really magnifies this trauma is how people react to you, what people say, how they react, and what they do. And so that little girl's mom, it was the weirdest thing. I couldn't figure out. She would never let me go in their house. If I was over there playing, I had to play outside.
Yes.
If I wanted to go to the bathroom, I had to go home.
So she made you the guilty party.
She made me the guilty party, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And you could sense that.
Yes, I could sense that something was way off. But she told my parents, and when my parents found out, they actually did go to the police. Unfortunately, that just kind of made things worse. I mean, not so much better. I mean, it was a mixed bag as far as what happened, and the police talked to my brothers first. They took my brothers into a room, and then they came out and got my sisters and I and took us in the room. And there was a couple of detectives, and then there was this like lady over here who was a social worker. By this time I was like 5, so I was a little bit older. They asked us questions. My sisters and I explained what happened, and what shocked me was the social worker lady said, if this boy, this teenager, was in the room and there was a big policeman on his left and a big policeman on his right and he could do nothing to you, would you still tell us the same thing? My sisters both said no, but I was looking at them shocked, like, well, if you're safe and there's somebody there to protect you, why wouldn't you just tell the truth? And I said, oh yeah, absolutely. I would tell the same story.
Yes. Does that mean your sisters were lying or
scared? They were scared, and they didn't go through as much as I did.
He didn't get to them?
No, my one sister has since told me she just bolted, so she didn't hear me at all. She ran as fast as she could as soon as she realized what was going on. My other sister told me that she heard me screaming and crying, and she turned around to come back to get me, and one of my brothers stopped her and said, no, it'll be okay. And I didn't find that out till I was in my 30s. And when I found that out, Lisa, it felt immediately at that moment like my brother had somehow sold me for something.
Yes.
Second time I was 11, and it was actually one of my brothers. It was the middle one, and he caught me one day by the arm and dragged me to his bedroom, and just again made me take all my clothes off and wanted he was 16, and this is no way an excuse, it's ridiculous, but I do know now he was practicing, for his dates and things like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I know now, didn't have intercourse, but he was practicing everything else.
Yeah.
So that happened a couple of times,
and you just froze.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't get out. I mean, my brother could bench press 400 pounds. So, he was in high school. I mean, what kind of a challenge was I going to be? I wasn't any challenge at all. I tried to run away at first, but when you get trapped again, it's like, let's just get this over with as fast as possible, and then I can get out of here.
Do whatever he wants at this point.
And get out of here, yeah.
Because as a child, that's what you had to do to get out.
Yes.
So you knew this was comfort. You knew, okay, now I can get out by the knowledge of past experiences.
Right. So that happened a couple of times, Lisa, and I thought, I kept thinking, I can't tell my mom, that my brother is doing this. I mean, who is she going to pick?
Right.
That's kind of how I felt.
Yes.
Like, which one of us would she pick to choose, to save, to protect, So I started planning how I could run away, where I could hide, what I could do. And I had a friend, we were going to do this. And then
you were 11?
I was 11. Because I had to get away from it. I mean, again, I'm in a position, I have to figure this out for myself.
And this is in the safe walls of your home.
Yeah, this is inside my own home.
Wow.
So how do I protect myself and get out of this? So this is kind of, to me, the silly part of it, but also it's very critical, is that my sisters and I used to watch the Miss America pageant, because this was back in the day you couldn't just repeat. You had to watch it live on TV.
Yes, there's no DVRs.
There's no DVRs or nothing. So that was a kind of a ritual in the fall that we had, Miss America night. And as I was getting ready for that, putting on my pajamas and everything, my dad takes all the other kids and he goes, come on, and he takes them out for ice cream. So I come out and they're all gone. And so there's no Miss America ritual thing going on. My mother's there, And she's in her room and I'm in my room. And I'm flooded with all this pain from what my brother's doing. And I'm crying because I don't know what to do. I mean, how do you get out of this? And then my mom just called from her room, what's wrong? Or something like that. And I said, oh, nothing. You know, I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know? And I got quiet crying. And in my child mind, I'm like, okay, if my mom comes, I can tell her anything and everything. If she doesn't come, I can never tell her. And she did not come. So,
Wow.
yeah. So now, again, I'm like, I'm on my own. Now, I haven't really talked a lot about this publicly in counseling. A few friends my husband knows. Because you've mentioned, Lisa, how sometimes there's people still in your life and you're trying to protect them. And my mother was the one that was still in my life, and she died a few years ago. So I don't feel like I'm embarrassing her or anything anymore. And I just feel like if it will help people to hear my story for them to be able to progress, then that's what I want to do. So I had to think, how am I going to get out of this? Well, he came after me another time, and he was like, you get over here. And I was like, no. I screamed it really loud, and I turned and I ran as fast as I could.
Good for you.
Away. And because he didn't get a hold of my arm, so he couldn't trap me. And then he never tried again.
Wow.
And I thought, that's all it took. But you know, when you get broken down, you don't know, you can't think, you can't figure out, how do I get out of this? So then I was like, okay, we move on. Life goes on, you have to go on. And my parents split apart, there was a whole thing. And so I wasn't living with my brothers anymore. And so that was
so brothers went with dad?
No, one of my brothers had started college. This brother was a senior in high school. So my mom actually left him at the house we were living in to finish out his school year.
Oh, so you were relieved about that.
Oh, yes. And then my mom took my sisters and I and moved to the next town and had a really good job, there and stuff like that. And so I didn't have to deal with him at all. But I just thought, he was just, to me, just nasty.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't have him around anymore.
So how was it later when it came to intimacy? Because people who have had sexual abuse like that, like molestation, usually causes you to fight or flight, or to fight all the time, or, and you had the conflict of, you wanted to fight or flight as a 4-year-old, but then as an 11-year-old, you realized fighting and being strong gets me out of things. So how did you deal with all of that as an adult, having a healthy sexual life?
Well, it's interesting, Lisa, because I've kind of thought a little bit about, for me, my mindset as an older teenager became that if I choose to have sex with somebody, I'm in control. Then they can't take it from me. So this is where people go. They're either afraid of it and they run from it, or they run towards it to have control. And I was a run towards it to have control kind of person.
Oh.
Yeah. So I waited till after I was out of high school before I started being, really sexually active. But I thought I was in control. But you're really completely out of control at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So when I turned 18, I had met this guy. The town I lived in had, the cruising Main Street thing. And so,
yes.
So I used to cruise Main Street with my friends, and we met a lot of different guys and things. And so I was at this party one time, and this one guy, tall, big, he could have been, I think he was a wrestler and a football player, and very handsome, and a lot of the girls. So anyway, I was at this party, and he and I were dancing, and he had his arms around me like this. And he says, you know what? I feel like I could just go like this and break your back.
Wow.
So that's grooming.
Mm-hmm.
Because then the next time I was alone with him, it's in my mind that if I fight him, he could break my back.
Yes.
And so I did, again, kind of collapsed into it because of that fight or flight and him being so big and having groomed my thinking. And so I date raped really at the end of the day, because I kept telling him, no, I don't want to do this. And so that was when I started thinking, I still went into it all the way into college and stuff. And then when I was 20, I moved to a 4-year college. I had gone to a 2-year college. So then I moved to a 4-year college. Mm-hmm. And at the September of my junior year, I did go to a party, and they were using coke and stuff. And I didn't know what any of that would do with people. You know how people would react. I wasn't a drug user. I wasn't in the drug culture.
Yes.
But one of the guys that was using came into my room when I was sleeping in the middle of the night and then sexually assaulted me.
Oh my goodness.
So I felt like, is this what I was made for?
Yeah.
Why? And I remember, and like I said, it's the way other people react. So my friend whose house I was staying at, when I talked to her the next day, she starts yelling at me. Like,
for what?
For having sex in her bed.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't even get a chance to tell her that I didn't want that, that I was scared, that I was trapped again, that kind of thing. So she says on that phone call, well, we'll just never talk about this again. And my thought was, you're right, because I'll never speak to you again.
Yes.
So you lose friendships, you lose relationships, all kinds of stuff like that because of these types of things. So I remember that was when I thought, I'm done. I got to keep myself safe. I got to stay out of environments where this kind of thing can happen. I'm not going to date anybody. I'm just going to focus on school and do my degree, and I'm done. And that was the same time I actually met the man I married.
Wow.
Was right after all that stuff was happening. And he was totally different than my brothers, than the men I'd been around and things like that. And he started out just being a friend with me, and he felt extremely safe.
Yes, that's important.
Yeah, he was very safe. But and then when he and I got married a year later, when I was 22, I got married, and I've been married to the same man since. That's part of my resiliency. Yes. I was able to allow myself to let him close enough to marry, and I enjoyed being with him, because I felt so safe.
Oh, that's so wonderful.
So I never had a problem really in the marriage with it, because I always enjoyed it. I just, when it was my choice, or
yes,
but yeah, he's always been very safe and a very kind person.
What advice would you give to maybe a husband or a wife who's married to someone who's gone through sexual trauma?
Be gentle is one of the biggest things. People who have been sexually abused, and it can be men. I have had husbands come in and talk about it too. If you move too fast or you pressure too fast, you re-trigger the trauma response, because it's still inside of us. If we know that all these adrenalines, norepinephrines, cortisols, I call it a hormone cocktail. They go very high. Now, if a person is trapped and cannot get out, that locks in their muscles, and there's muscle memory. And it's like, we know something like over 80% of women who have fibromyalgia have been sexually abused. And it's like these stress hormones locked inside their muscles. And so encouraging movement, encouraging relaxation can also be helpful. Letting them know they're safe. And if they have to talk about it, I'm going to tell you, those of us who've had PTSD, we're kind of boring once we start talking about it. I had a friend who was a counselor, and she said, and she was a trauma counselor for sexual abuse, and she said, my first job is to get my clients to talk about it. My second job is to get them to stop talking about it.
Yes.
Because we tend to want to just talk and talk and talk, because finally it's just flooding out. It floods out. And I found that this forgiveness prayer, where you do one thing at a time, helps to process that faster, helps to release it. Now, the first time I said the prayer for this person, it may not necessarily totally go away inside of me. So I just kept saying it every day, until it didn't bother me anymore. It sounds really weird, but you really have to be conscious and serious about it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have very much confidence in myself, even though, and I never thought I was a smart person. It sounds weird because I found out my IQ was 150, but I never thought I was very smart.
Yeah.
And it's because my brain would cloud. You know, when you have these stress hormones in you and they get triggered, your brain clouds.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I ended up feeling like I can't think, I'm not smart, I don't know the answer. But it was really because all the stress hormones were blocking like the prefrontal cortex. And so once you learn how to process those, because once they're triggered, they have to be metabolized.
Yes.
And your body just feels terrible until they metabolize.
Explain that for people who don't understand.
Okay, so the stress hormones I mentioned, you get triggered, and those can flood your system. Mm-hmm. They can make your muscles ache, they can make you hungry or not hungry, they can cloud your brain, and it can make you feel really stupid, and you can start cycling negative thinking. Because when you were in the trauma place, when I remember I mentioned like some of that childhood thinking, yes. So that those thought patterns lock into your brain. So now when your body gets flooded with the hormones, they actually create those thoughts in your brain. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking like I was thinking, I'm trapped, I can't get out of this. By the time I went through all these abuses, Lisa, I have a negative thought of I always have to figure it out myself.
Yes.
So I have a really hard time asking people to help me with anything. I can
relate to that.
Yeah. So when my body gets flooded, like if I get triggered, and it really could even be something like a bird flies really fast by my eye and it startles me. Mm-hmm. So anytime you startle, it can cause this. And all of a sudden I'll notice I'm thinking like, oh yeah, nobody's there for me. I have to figure this all out myself. And then I have to stop myself and go, okay, those are my not real thoughts. Now, they're really there. I'm not saying you're not really thinking them, but they're not the truth.
Right. And you don't want to fuel them on by continuing to think in that way.
No. So that's where I turn to Jesus and I'm like, okay, help me to just calm down. So sometimes I have these two thought trains going on in my brain like constantly. And one of them might be this negative thought, and the other one is that's not the truth. Jesus doesn't think that of me. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a child of God. I am smart. I am made the way He wants me to be made, you know, and that kind of thing. And
so do you want to give any last minute recommendations of books or workbooks or anything that you have that you're offering?
Well, for me, I'm a marriage counselor, and I have written a workbook. Okay. Gosh, I even forgot the title of it and forgot to bring it with me. Building a Thriving Marriage.
Yes.
Tools and Strategies. And that workbook, like if you didn't want to go to counseling, it's like counseling in a workbook. It's like an entire intensive, because I do it in an intensive model, which is like 5 hours a day for 5 days. And that workbook is based on that. And it isn't just, you know, here's what you need to do. It's like, here's an exercise, do it. And then how do you feel about how you did it? If you struggled, why do you think you were struggling? And it'll bring you back to some of this, like what you've got in your background that keeps stopping you from doing what you need to do with your spouse. And so I have that. If you want anything on birth, I have 2 books. One is, well, I have more than 2, but you would have to contact me for these. One is life issues that can affect childbirth, because life issues do affect how we approach childbirth. And for me, I had a very long, hard labor with my first baby, 34 hours of back labor, shorten it there. And after he was born, the OB, who was a natural childbirth doctor, came over to me, and see, this is again the power of people's words.
Yes.
He came over to me and he said, I was in recovery, and he was like, I have to go back to my office. I need to see some patients. And he just reached down and gently touched my arm, and he looked at me and he said, "You are one of the strongest women I've ever met."
Wow.
And I thought, I am? You know? But you have no idea how that has stayed with me. And my son is 41 years old. So there's power in those words. And I did go back to that OB, gosh, probably 15 years ago, and had lunch with him and thanked him for, you know,
words of life.
The words of life.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So childbirth is often affected, you know, and people either go into it. And part of the reason I had a natural birth is, well, you know, this is what I'm made for.
Yeah.
And then I had a little boy, and I'm like, oh, there's another male taking control over my body.
Oh, wow.
But, you know, you grow to, you know, you really do love them, and I wanted him to have a better life. So that's why it was so important. And I have 3 sons now. That's why it was so important for me to get rid of that hatred and that anger and that calamity, as the Bible talked about, towards males. Because I have 3 little males I brought into the world.
Yes.
And I never wanted my sons to think that their mother hated them or didn't like them. And I think they're amazing men.
Yeah.
They've grown up to really be very powerful, amazing men.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And I did keep them out of people's houses if I didn't know them.
Oh, I bet.
Growing up, it affects your parenting.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. There's some things I know I was a little bit too strict on because I knew what could happen.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.